reporters asked. Chapter 1061. I'm back. The income situation? I'm not sure. Tang Ru didn't show any sort of confusion, merely saying this calmly. The reporters took a moment to react. This answer really wasn't what they were expecting. They might have asked such a question, but this was just to set up the following discussion. The income of a pro player was something that any normal internet cafe player would drool over for half a day. Yet Tang Ru had replied with, "Not sure." This sort of answer was setting things up in the wrong direction. Some veterans who heard this response from Tang Ru all sent meaningful stares at Chen Guo. They thought that this was a plot by the happy boss, to keep the players ignorant and naive so that they were easier to control. But unfortunately, when they went to scrutinize Chen Guo, they found that she didn't seem at all unsettled or nervous at Tang Ru's answer, and instead smiled happily, and that was the extent of her reaction. What was going on? Now the reporters were confused. Never mind pro players, no matter what job, who would go in completely blind to the income situation? Was this pretty lady messing with them on purpose? The reporters looked around doubtfully until the press officer asked to rush them again. Are there any more questions? All these hold-ups in the press conference today was causing him to get a little impatient. Could you guys leak a little information on the treatment Team Happy's players are getting right now? The reporters kept at it, but they no longer focused on Tang Ru, throwing the question at Chen Guo instead. The reporters did have a rather keen judgment. This question struck at Happy's heart. Chen Guo answered a little stutteringly, "In the Challenger League, we all gathered out of our love for glory. Now that we're going to be a pro team, we're going to begin discussing the contracts in detail. We have yet to start, so there's nothing to leak, yet." The reporters were thunderstruck. If this was a tourist team that a few players created just to have fun, then this sort of circumstance would be definite. However, Team Happy was the winner of the Challenger League who defeated excellent Era and had God Yi Shu. Chen Guo seemed to be saying that with their lineup and circumstance, they didn't seem to have any sort of income, it was all out of joy. So what you mean to say is that, until now, Team Happy's players aren't earning an income? Someone finally asked carefully. Chen Guo felt a little awkward, but she wasn't the kind of person to hide things and would never tell a blatant lie in such a situation. She could only nod and say, yes. A cacophony rose from the crowd at once and someone immediately pursued the issue. Even God Yi Shu? Yeah, Chen Guo hesitated for a moment. It was probably better to not talk about the income he gained as an employee of the internet cafe. Nothing needed to be mentioned about the chaos that erupted then. Happy's situation was truly too shocking. Even disregarding the no-income thing, Chen Guo's words suggested that they had yet to talk about contracts. That was something they definitely had to report on. You had to keep in mind that they already had the qualifications to attend the Pro League next season and everyone was about to become real pro players. Were they waiting to have a big sale of players upon entering the alliance or something, still not ready with the contracts to ensure the players stayed? With the performance Happy's players had in the Challenger League, the reporters knew that a lot of pro teams would show interest. Hadn't a lot of gossip come out when the Challenger League? Speaking of, there were teams who were interested in Happy's players even back then, but now, Happy's lineup was still whole and none of them had been moved by what the other teams said. Yet, from what the boss had said, there had been no incentive given for the players to stay. Happy's players formed a team and stayed true to it of their own volition? That was unscientific. The other teams probably knew how strangely Team Happy operated and therefore didn't make any moves on their players. If this information was released, Team Happy wouldn't be immediately dismantled, would it? The reporters even started worrying for Happy about this. However, they knew that this would most certainly get out. There were so many reporters here and they couldn't be certain that everyone was willing to keep this information to themselves, so the thought of helping them hide this information out of sympathy was childish and illogical. Someone was probably already organizing this information into a draft to publish. Overall, Happy really was a new experience for the media. They actually leaked something so important in a press conference. The reporters lamented over this, gradually having the suspicion that Happy was acting nonchalant after gaining something big. The conference was a little chaotic and, looking at the time, the Alliance press officer realized it was late, deciding to announce that the next question was going to be the last one after discussing with Happy. The reporters had gotten a lot of information from today's press conference. They couldn't pry too much for the last question, so any experienced reporter wouldn't ask anything too complicated. There was little point in ending this on low spirits. After being apart from the alliance for so long, is there anything you want to say right now? The last question was still directed at Yi Shu. Ha ha ha, Yi Shu chuckled and then said, I'm back. I'm back. This simple sentence displayed immense determination. Although a surplus of interesting information had been dug up in the press conference, and even though everyone had started drafting out their articles on this information during the press conference, in the end, the media stands all chose this one sentence as their headlines. Yi Shu, I'm back. Apart from that, the media groups all did their best to compile, collate and express, reporting the other contents. A year of preparations was what gave Happy the win. Opportunity smiles only upon those who are prepared. Excellent Era's ex-captain strikes in the press conference, condemning Excellent Era's boss, Dao Zhan, for abandoning Excellent Era. Happy, brought together by love. ... This news all had plenty of substance to it and were written in whatever way that would elicit the best reactions. Yet this was nothing more than leaking the information from the press conference. The true value of this discussion was in using the information to guide the people. Those reporters that liked Excellent Era used Yi Shu's speech and the best of their writing capabilities to segregate Excellent Era from Dao Zhan. All the dirt on Excellent Era's name was shifted onto Dao Zhan. The other neutral reporters didn't point them in a different direction either, faced with the clarity of truth. It isn't the team's fault, but a specific person. With this description, everyone found it reasonable after reading. All these incidents were created by a single person, the boss, who had ordered this. It was his control that had brought the team down with him. Thus, in an instant, the winds changed. Many Excellent Era fans had already disbanded. They couldn't tolerate all the shocking situations that Excellent Era had revealed and were giving up on Excellent Era. However, with the freshly printed articles, their sorrow and disappointment all turned to anger. They gathered once more to protect their team Excellent Era. They wanted to exorcise the real malice behind all this. Get out of here, Dao Zhan. Within the day, signs like these were all over Club Excellent Era's walls, their grounds and in the hands of the players. Beg for Excellent Era to not be sold? No such player ever appeared again. They had already realized that the sale of Excellent Era wouldn't cause it to collapse, but if they let Dao Zhan continue his ways, then Excellent Era's name would be forever tarnished. Excellent Era belonged to all of them, but it was nothing but fixed assets in Dao Zhan's hands. That was Excellent Era's physical form, but not its soul. Where was its soul? Its soul was in the hearts of all its fans. The loyal Excellent Era fans condemned Dao Zhan while at the same time began to call out, asking for someone who truly loved glory in Excellent Era to take over Team Excellent Era. In that instant, Excellent Era was revived. The fans were always the greatest wealth that team had. No one was willing to take Excellent Era in full because all the things that had happened with Excellent Era had caused them to lose the support of their fans. This sort of mess wasn't something that anyone was willing to deal with. Yet now, the fans had saved themselves. They realized where the problem had occurred and found a way to solve it. They came out to support Excellent Era once more. This was something everyone noticed. This sort of Excellent Era could stand on its own once more. However, there was a requirement to that, and that was that Dao Zhan had to leave. He could leave with all his possessions, but he couldn't take a single fan with him. Even if there was nothing here any longer, the fans would stand guard here. With their protection, Excellent Era could rise again from nothing and be reborn. How did this change happen? It started from the words Yi Shu had said to the reporters. They awakened so many fans. Yi Shu was their captain forever. No Excellent Era fan would ever doubt that again. Even though Excellent Era had been sent out of the Pro League by him personally, that was a match and that was all there was to it. Wasn't this always their captain's attitude on the field? After departing for a year, their once captain officially announced he was back. It was just unfortunate that he didn't return to Excellent Era. Though some people were already calling for Yi Shu to come back and lead Excellent Era again, most of the fans couldn't ask that of him anymore. It was too selfish. Yi Shu had done enough for Excellent Era. They had no reason to relentlessly demand him make any more contributions. Yi Shu didn't owe Excellent Era anything. It was Excellent Era that owed him too much. Disregarding everything else, this was true from just looking at the contract he had signed. Han Wengting, who had slaughtered his way through the alliance from the very beginning alongside Yi Shu, had the heftiest contract in the alliance. As for their captain, All these years, he still held the contract that had been signed at the beginning of the alliance, a contract that gave him a pitiful income in these times. Talking about money was somewhat blunt, but Excellent Era owed their captain this bluntness. However, he had never expressed anger about it because he had never cared. All he ever wanted was one thing: victory. This was something that would never change for him, no matter where he was. All the Excellent Era fans could do was give him their blessings. Chapter 1062. Keep winning through the booing. The commotion surrounding Excellent Era was still going on, but Excellent Era was big, not nearly as easy to take over as Team Everlasting. Even disregarding everything else, just the God-level account, Battle God 1 Autumn Leaf, was probably more valuable than all of Team Everlasting's assets put together. Plus, Excellent Era had been a part of the Alliance for years, so they had their own training grounds. Their own stadium that had been built over the years of the Alliance's rapid development. Excellent Era was massive. There was nothing that you could just buy on a whim. Public opinion and the support of the fans had reawakened its inner value. This might have elicited interest, but it also made a purchase harder. Considering this inner value, Excellent Era's worth was even greater. However, what was good for buyers was that Excellent Era's boss, Dao Zhan, had been pushed to a point where he had to sell Excellent Era. Team Excellent Era had the chance continue to grow and create profit in anyone's hands except his, for that would turn it into a sinking ship with the loss of fan support. With the path clear, how the future transactions concerning Excellent Era would go was up to the buyer and seller to negotiate. From popular opinion, most believed that Excellent Era wouldn't be completely bought out as a whole. After all, Excellent Era had a lot to it. Such a large investment would require several years of good business, and that was only if Excellent Era could swiftly return to the Pro Alliance and compete as a viable champion team. However, there would always be risks in competition. If Excellent Era had another bad year and couldn't get back to the Alliance, then that would really be something to weep about. Therefore, popular opinion said that Excellent Era would most likely sell some of its basic hardware to decrease its overall value and risk. That way, someone would be willing to take it on. How far negotiations had gone so far, no one knew, and the playoffs for the 9th season of the Pro Alliance was fast approaching. After testing things out at the Challenger League, the Alliance eventually decided that the playoffs for the Pro Alliance would be conducted using the headcount rules of the offline Challenger League tournament matches. Additionally, after obtaining the opinions of multiple parties, the scoring method was set as a point for every opponent killed. Whoever had more points would be the victor. Apart from that, another large change was made to the rules. The new playoffs wouldn't be decided through the sum of the points of each team for 2 rounds of matches. Instead, the Alliance would use the overall victory of each individual round to make a judgment. The victor would be decided best 2 of 3. That meant it had changed from needing to fight 2 rounds to possibly 3. Without a doubt, this was a change for the better from both competition and economic viewpoints, and the reason this change could be made was because of the use of the new rules. The old rules split a round into 3 parts: individual competition, group arena, team competition. Under the situation where the team competition took up the majority of the points, the overall victory could be decided by 2 parts and the group arena would lose its purpose. However, if the points of the team competition were lowered, the victory could be decided with just the individual competition and group arena, and there might not be a reason to hold the team competition. The Alliance didn't want any of these situations to happen, and the new rules would prevent any of the aforementioned situations from occurring. And if the head counts of the 2 sides were tied at the end, then that could be dealt with through overtime, so it wasn't a problem. With that, the 2 best of 3 rules would be implemented. Then, amidst the enthusiastic promotion by the Alliance, the playoffs came closer and closer, once again taking center stage in the glory circle. The members of the 8 teams that had made it to the playoffs all appeared on stage, raising support for their teams. Now that they had gotten here, any team had the reason to anticipate getting that trophy sitting at the pinnacle. However, when being interviewed, all 8 teams had been asked questions regarding Happy. Even if those questions had been asked long ago, the media didn't rest. For someone who didn't understand the backstory to this, they would probably think that Happy was a hidden B-boss in the playoffs or something upon reading these interviews. Otherwise, why else would every interview for every team mention the name Happy? What are your opinions on Yishu's return? In the interview with Tyranny, all the reporters were willing to ask Han Wenking this question. I eagerly await to meet him on the stage. As a longtime rival, Han Wenking's welcome to Yi Shu was still with his fists. As another player who retired and returned, is there anything you would like to say to Yi Shu? Zhang Jiali was also a focus in the interview. He accomplished something I had thought impossible. For that, I truly admire him, Zhang Jiali replied. What are your thoughts on Yi Shu's return? In the interview with Blue Rain, the same question appeared. The skill level of the entire alliance will rise a stage, Blue Rain's captain Yu Wenzhou expressed. Don't you think that without Excellent Era, it would be more of a loss? A reporter asked. Hey, don't worry too much about that. Does Excellent Era's skill level not rely on their players? With their situation, there's little chance their players would stay. I think they'll find an opportunity to transfer and we'll definitely see them in the alliance again. How about we guess where they'll go? For example, Sun Shang, I think. Next question. The press officer from Blue Rain cut Huang Shaoshan off stoically. He had gotten used to doing this because of how many times he had to in the past. Huang Shaoshan's feelings? What was that? Never heard of it. In the Samsara interview, Zhou Zikai gave a before falling into a lengthy silence when faced with the question of Yi Shu's return. It wasn't until the atmosphere of the place had gone a little strange that he abruptly spoke up and added two words, very difficult. You mean to say, that it'll be very difficult to deal with Yi Shu? Yes, Zhou Zikai nodded. Okay, this was Zhou Zikai. Being able to get this sort of response was already good enough. If they wanted to know more opinions, it'd be better to just go and find their vice-captain Zhang Batao. The 8 teams all had different responses. The media had gotten what they wanted. However, in truth, these 8 teams definitely wouldn't put their focus on Yi Shu, who they would only see next season. The fight for the Season 9 championships was about to start and the first match was the gossip-filled match between Tyranny and 100 Blossoms. The first round would be held on 100 Blossoms turf and the tension was obvious. Even today, there were many 100 Blossoms players who couldn't accept Zhang Zhao's decision to join Tyranny after returning. When Zhang Jiali appeared, thunderous booing instantly flooded the stadium. Zhang Jiali was emotionless. This wasn't the first time he had gotten this sort of reception. During the regular season, he had already received such treatment in this stadium, the very stadium that he had fought in for years, the stadium he was oh so familiar with. Now that it had come to the playoffs, Zhang Jiali was facing a similar situation to Yi Shu and had to fight to the death with his original team. What was he feeling? Zhang Jiali had been asked such a question in the pre-match interview. He didn't answer because he didn't know what he was feeling. He had once thought he could deal with this calmly, but now that it came to it, he found that it wasn't so simple. Amidst the boos, Zhang Jiali silently walked towards the preparations room. Go die! A bellow rang out from the spectator stands and they saw a group of enraged 100 Blossom fans throw filled drink bottles down. This life and death elimination match had scattered their rationality. It was good that they were rather far away and the closest weren't very accurate. Zhang Jiali hurriedly dodged this attack. The security guards had already split into 2 teams, one team went to stop these fans and the other rushed over to protect Zhang Jiali from further harm. The troublemaker fans had been sent out of the stadium. No matter what, this sort of act would be condemned heavily. Zhang Jiali quietly watched the fans being escorted out and some still had their heads turned to curse at him. Zhang Jiali sighed, before realizing that someone next to him was staring at him. Zhang Jiali turned his head to look and paused for a moment before squeezing out a strained smile. Little La. Little La was one of the security guards at 100 Blossoms, and had been one when Zhang Jiali was still there. At the same time, he was also a loyal fan of 100 Blossoms and the entire team was very familiar with him. Welcome back, Little La said, walking closer, but his face was unsmiling. Zhang Jiali wasn't sure how to react for a moment, about to say something when Little La suddenly sent him a punch. The stadium was rather chaotic right now and no one expected that even security guards would do something so irrational. Little La was quickly restrained by his fellows. He didn't struggle at all, just gazed at Zhang Jiali without a hint of a smile. Let him go. Zhang Jiali could still feel bile coming up from the punch, but managed to squeeze out the sentence. The guards knew the severity of what Little La had done, but if Zhang Jiali wasn't going to press, then there was room to maneuver. They all rather obviously favored little La and hurriedly let him go upon hearing Zhang Jiao's words, but kept him back to prevent him from acting rashly again. To be a champion, I will win. Zhang Jiali threw these 6 words down before turning and leaving. None of Tyranny had clearly seen the chaos that had erupted just now, only seeing the security grabbing another person, guessing that something must have happened. However, Zhang Jiali simply shook his head and didn't say much more. Everyone knew that this match was very difficult for Zhang Jiali and didn't pry. Don't worry, I'm fine. After sitting in his spot for a long while, Zhang Jiali suddenly spoke up. Though his teammates didn't ask, he could still feel the worry they had for him. The team was a whole. He needed to use his attitude to disperse their worries and get everyone focused on the match. We must win. After taking a deep breath, Zhang Jiali stood amidst the boos. In the public announcement just now, the players for each side had been announced. The first to go up for Tyranny was Zhang Jiali. After several minutes, when he walked down from the stage, Team Tyranny had already gained 2 points. Zhang Jiali had successfully accomplished a 1 vs 2 in the group arena, only falling against the third person. For the championship, I have to be strong and keep winning. With this in mind, Zhang Jiali returned to Tyranny's bench amidst the boos with his head high and back straight. The first day of the playoffs saw Team Tyranny winning their away game against Team 100 Blossoms, 11-7. The MVP that day was the Team Tyranny player, Zhang Jiali. Account: Spitfire, 100 Dazzling Blossoms. Chapter 1063. Semi-finalists. In the post-match interviews, Zhang Jiali was faced with many more sensitive questions as the MVP and 100 Blossoms ex-captain. Zhang Jiali was composed, only expressing his determination to win the championships. For the championships, Zhang Jiali mercilessly crushes 100 Blossoms. The media, who always liked to twist things a little, had to write much drama into the topic. The match of the second day arrived amidst the clamor and discussion. This match wasn't as drama-filled as Tyranny vs 100 Blossoms. Samsara still had Zhou Zikai as their ace and core, while Void, as always, had their Ghostblade duo of Li Zan and Wu Yus. In the end, Zhou Zikai's fast shooting broke through Void's Ghostblade duo and Team Samsara won their away game 11-8 against Void. On the third day, it was Wind Howl vs Misty Rain. Wind Howl's Zhao Yuji desperately wanted to become the Alliance's #1 elementalist. In the Rookie Challenge, he had tried to imitate his captain, Tang Hao, challenging Misty Rain's ace, Chu Yongshu. Unfortunately, he lost in the end. The two teams were paired in the playoffs and, for Zhao Yuji, this was another good opportunity to prove himself. Unfortunately for him, he was far from being the star of the show. Tang Hao was undoubtedly the star of Wind Howl. They also had #2 player Fang Rui. As the representative of playing dirty, how dirty he could play each match was always something people eagerly anticipated seeing. For Misty Rain, Chu Yongshu had never been an extremely competitive person, so there wasn't all that much to see about Zhao Yuji challenging her. Zhao Yu's ambitions had never aroused much attention. It was the beautiful twin sisters, Shu Qi and Shu Kexing, that Misty Rain had dug up during the winter season who gained the most public attention. Team Misty Rain didn't give them 2 new characters. They used the 2 male sharpshooters that they had used originally in the game, Lower Your Head and None Dare Attack. In the end, Team Misty Rain had 3 female players, yet not a single female character appeared on the field. The 3 characters played by the female players, Windy Rain, Lower Your Head and None Dare Attack, were all male characters. Of course, after being equipped with pro-level equipment, the strength of the 2 new characters had skyrocketed. In the latter half of the season, the twins had more and more chances to appear on the field. The 2 were both doing their best to get used to the pro circle and enter a better state. Everyone was wondering, would these 2 become Misty Rain's ace card in the playoffs? Not disappointing everyone's hopes, Shu Qi and Shu Kexing ended up being a part of the starting lineup in the team competition for their opening match of the playoffs. Unfortunately, they didn't become the aces to Misty Rain's victory, because Misty Rain seemed to have forgotten that Wind Howl had Fang Rui, a man who would die if he didn't play dirty, and playing dirty was definitely the way to suppress noobs. The twins' first journey in the playoffs wasn't a smooth one and Team Misty Rain lost 9-11 to Wind Howl in their home game. 3 matches of the first round of playoffs had gone by and what resulted was a flood of visiting teams winning home teams. It was on the fourth day that this status quo was finally broken. In the much-anticipated Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain match, the home team, Team Blue Rain, finally won back some face for home teams and won 11-9 against the visiting team, Team Tiny Herb. These two teams were already archrivals. Now that both had spectacular rookies, this match was full of ups and downs, a wonderful experience for the audience. This match was definitely the most spectacular match amongst the opening round matches. With the opening round coming to curtain call, next up was the second round. In the end, the first match of the second round was a totally unexpected victory for Team 100 Blossoms, who managed to win against Team Tyranny in a close call 1-9. Team 100 Blossoms hadn't had any sort of obvious advantage throughout the match, but gave a performance full of persistence and desperation. The entire team was feeling the pressure. In this season, they hadn't started out well and were plagued by criticism. It was good that they were able to catch the last bus to the playoffs after the big update. This achievement filled the team and fans with hope that they might be able to advance in the playoffs. Yet, the very first match was coincidentally against the team that Zhang Jiali had joined, the team that public opinion said was the most likely to be the champions, Team Tyranny. The fans all hoped that they would be shown their place. But while hopes and dreams were wonderful, reality was cruel. In the first round, they lost their home game, bringing the 100 Blossom fans back to that chilling season opening. Especially since Zhang Jiali had gotten the MVP for that match, that made things unbearably painful. However, Team 100 Blossoms didn't give up. They managed to surge up under this pressure and counter with a heavy blow to Tyranny on Tyranny's home turf. There were no weak teams in the playoffs. The 100 Blossom fans were proud of their team. Their tie with Tyranny was enough to make many media groups write the headlines of the following day as the flourishing resurgence of 100 Blossoms. No such reversal appeared in the two matches of the next 2 days. Samsara defeated Void in their home game, Wind Howl took down the visiting Misty Rain, and the two teams were set as semi-finalists. Team Void always managed to enter the quarter-finals, but would also always get stopped there. Their dual-linking Ghost Boundary duo was a classic pair in the Glory Circle, but this pair never managed to achieve a convincing accomplishment. Should Team Void make some greater adjustments to achieve a breakthrough? This was something many people started discussing after this match. As for Misty Rain, they might have lost the match, but their fans gained hope. This hope came from the twins. Though these twins were girls like Chu Youngshu, their demeanor on the battlefield definitely wasn't like some maiden in distress. The two had open and strong personalities and great cooperation. Team Misty Rain had often been seen as lacking in a headstrong temperament because their ace was female, but now this might change because of these other two female players. Misty Rain's tactical system was changing rather obviously. This pair of twins might very well become the future core of Misty Rain, if they developed their skills well. As for Chu Youngshu, she was changing from a DPS-based elementalist to a support. Perhaps this role was better suited to her personality. Then, Misty Rain's other all-star level player, Li Hua, was a sneak attack and assassination expert. People were eagerly anticipating Misty Rain's future developments. Then, on the fourth day, it was Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain again, but this time they were competing on Tiny Herb's turf. This time, it was Tiny Herb who had used their home advantage to wipe out Blue Rain. From this, it was clear that the two teams were very close in skill level, having to eventually use the home advantage to influence the scales of victory. Tyranny vs. 100 Blossoms and Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain both needed a third match to decide the victor. The third round of competitions would continue on the same home turf of the second round matches. That meant, it would still be the higher-ranked Tyranny and Tiny Herb's home games. However, for the third round, the home advantage would be greatly reduced. The home team would only have a familiar environment and the support of local fans, but this round, they would no longer have the right to choose their maps. The right to choose the map was the greatest home advantage in glory competitions, and the Alliance considered how to make this as fair as possible. They were giving the team with a higher rank a part of the home advantage, but this advantage couldn't be too influential on the final victor. In the past, it was just the situation of away then home that gave them an easier time taking control of the situation. Now, the third round had been handed to them, but the right to choose the map was too big of an advantage, so they took away this right. The map for the third round would be randomly chosen from the map bank that had been prepared for the playoffs. These maps were designed specifically for the playoffs by the developers, and info on them wouldn't be leaked at all. That meant that the third round would be played with the teams having zero knowledge of the map. This sort of match would definitely be a test of the adaptability of the two teams. The first match of the third round was Tyranny vs 100 Blossoms again. The experienced veterans had helped them greatly on this sort of unfamiliar map. Having one senior was like having a treasure, and Tyranny had three. In the group arena, this sort of advantage wasn't evident, but in the team competition, the veterans understood the map better and were better able to find opportunities in battle than 100 Blossoms. Team 100 Blossoms might be persistent, but they were still suppressed by Team Tyranny. In the end, Tyranny won 11-8. 100 Blossoms lost. But this time, they weren't the target of any blame. Tyranny's strength this season was clear as crystal to anyone with eyes. Though the fans hoped for more from 100 Blossoms, they were satisfied that the match had gone this far. Team 100 Blossoms had found their rhythm. So long as they continued down this path, they believed that victory would descend on them. The team and the fans both bid the playoffs goodbye with this sort of confidence in their hearts. As for the other match after this, it was Tiny Herb vs Blue Rain. One of the two powerhouses was doomed to be eliminated in the opening round. This was quite the shame. In the end, Team Tiny Herb managed to win this match. What had influenced the scales of victory, in the end, wasn't the tiny home advantage that Team Tiny Herb held. In the match, Team Blue Rain's rookie, Lu Hanwen, made a serious mistake which became the turning point for the match. This optimistic and energetic young man finally shed tears in the post-match interview, causing the reporters to be unable to blame him at all. No one would forget, this was a teenager who wasn't even 15 yet. But would Blue Rain be hindering his growth, letting such a young player bear the weight of such a heavy responsibility? Next time, I'll be stronger. No one would have thought that in the end, Lu Hanwen would wipe away his own tears and say this to the reporters with determination. He was truly an amazing rookie. The reporters were surprised. They had seen plenty of players be finished for good after experiencing a setback, especially those that had dragged down their team in important matches like this. But this young man wouldn't. He would be regretful enough to shed tears for his mistake, but this didn't dishearten him. He turned this all into motivation to get stronger. A player like this, full of positivity, wouldn't just get stronger, but someday, he'd become a role model for all pro players, wouldn't he? Everyone had full confidence in this in that moment. The quarterfinals of the playoffs came to a close there. Tyranny, Samsara, Wind Howl, Tiny Herb. The top four of the regular season had all defeated their opponents, reaching the semifinals. Chapter 1064. Bleak and Desolate Excellent Era. The playoffs advanced like wildfire. Happy's group had received invites from Lu Guaning and stayed over at Club Heavenly Swords for a few days. The two sides scrimmed with each other every day and watched the matches together. Apart from that, Lu Guaning started a discussion for any possibilities of continuing their collaboration with Happy. The two sides would be direct opponents in the league next season. There would be a direct collision of interests unlike before. Lu Guaning could be considered as starting off as a commoner and later becoming a nobleman. They first discussed and did a gentleman's agreement of what would be appropriate and what would be inappropriate for future collaborations in order to avoid any future disputes that would ruin the good relationship between them. After a hanging around for a few days, Happy returned home. When they left, Lu Guaning carefully told Yishu a piece of news: Excellent Era seems to want to sell one autumn leaf. They're currently making inquiries of our thoughts on the matter. Oh, Yishu's expression was the same as always, so what are your thoughts? 20 million. I think that's too much. It wasn't known if Lu Guaning intentionally gave Yishu the price. Lu Guaning laughed bitterly. At our current level, having this type of character is too much of a waste. You're quite rational now, Yishu felt moved. One step at a time, Lu Guaning smiled. That's good. See you, Yishu called out and got ready to leave. Then, Lu Guaning hesitated, but still spoke: one autumn leaf. If you're short on cash, just say the word. No need, Yishu smiled, it's the same as Excellent Era. It's all in the past. But what about little Tang? Lu Guaning pointed at Tang Ru. If she wants it, then she can buy it herself, Yishu said half-jokingly. Lu Guaning stared blankly. Then, he remembered Tang Ru's background and suddenly let out a laugh. Finally, he shook Yi Shu's hands and bade farewell. City H, Club Excellent Era. It had been several days since the commotion. The current Club Excellent Era felt cold and desolate despite the scorching summer heat. There were no fans gathered outside the club. The signs scattered everywhere had already been cleaned up by the sanitation workers. There were only a few traces left in certain areas. The main entrance to Club Excellent Era was still shut tight. The surrounding people all said that the gate seemed to have never opened these past few days. In front of this entrance, Yi Shu raised his head and looked at the Team Excellent Era emblem hanging there. Before, the team emblem was cleaned twice a week. Now, the team emblem hadn't been cleaned in several days and looked a lot duller. GGG. The main entrance was carefully opened a tiny bit. Half a head peeked out and looked at Yi Shu. That person was slightly surprised and then opened up the door a bit wider. Yi Shu and Su Mucheng walked in. The main entrance was immediately closed afterwards. The interior of Club Excellent Era seemed just as cold as the outside. Not a single person could be seen in the entire yard. The two walked towards Excellent Era's training center. Over here was where Excellent Era's players lived most of their daily lives, eating, sleeping, practicing. Apart from away matches, it was completely possible for a player to not leave a step out of this area. Yi Shu had lived that type of life for many years. They entered the building and went upstairs to the player residences. When they passed by the practice room, Yi Shu heard the tapping of a keyboard and the clicking of a mouse. It was Glory. Yi Shu could tell. This was a game that he was incomparably familiar with. When he heard the rhythm of the keyboard taps and mouse clicks, he could even imagine what that player was doing. There was still someone playing Glory in the Excellent Era practice room at this time? You go pack up. I'm going to take a look, Yi Shu said. Okay, Su Mucheng nodded her head and continued onwards to her room in the player residence area. Yi Shu walked into the practice room. The door to the practice room wasn't closed. Yi Shu walked inside gently and saw someone in front of a computer. He was playing Glory, the online arena. This person was playing a battle mage and was currently in an intense battle with an opponent. However, with just a few glances, Yi Shu had a rough idea of the situation. Everything went like he expected. Not even a minute passed and the battle mage was killed by the opponent. You suck, Yi Shu said. The person sitting at the chair suddenly turned his head. When he saw Yi Shu standing behind him, he stared blankly at him. For a long time, no words came out of his mouth. Dao Zan. At this moment, the person playing Glory in the Excellent Era practice room was actually Excellent Era's boss, Dao Zan. That Dao Zan who usually stood up high and only came to the practice room for inspections. Yi Shu took out a cigarette box and nimbly shook a cigarette out towards Dao Zan. Did you stop smoking? Dao Zan was surprised at first and then extended his hands out. I'll take one. After lighting up the cigarette, Dao Zan immediately sucked in a deep breath. It was as if he had found something to place his burdens on. How's the sale going? After smoking until about half a cigarette left, Yi Shu suddenly asked. Not too well, Dao Zan said, there's too much. There are very few people who could even take it all in the first place. We aren't in the alliance either, so the risk is too great. I've talked to several people, but the price was pushed down too much. It was impossible to negotiate. So, Yi Shu asked. Split it up, Dao Zan said. And then, Yi Shu asked. Then, Dao Zan stared blankly. There is no then. Yes, there was no then. Whether he sold the entire Excellent Era at once or parts of Excellent Era at a time, he would still be able to earn a huge amount of money. However, the timing was too poor. A situation where the seller must sell. There was no situation that could be worse than that for a seller. Any buyer who understood this point would calmly drag it on up until the price was satisfactory. Dao Zan had always been trying to maximize profits, but in the end, he could only quietly watch as the originally high prices were pushed down. It was a huge mockery to him. But in any case, Dao Zan would still be earning a considerable amount of money. But then what? Nothing. There was no place for him anymore in the Glory scene. The only thing that would accompany him would be the money that came from selling Excellent Era. And then, Dao Zan had thought about it, but he couldn't come up with anything. Having so much money should have been something that anyone would be overjoyed about, but he was at a loss. He seemed to be trapped in that painful situation where he had nothing but money. He didn't know how to get out of it. Invest? Start a new business? Dao Zhan had thought about it, but he always felt dispirited and downcast. He might as well just play Glory and have some fun. Glory. He had obviously been a player once. If not, how could he have gotten to know Yishu and Su Mukyu? But his skill level was limited and he was old. He wasn't someone who could stand on stage. In the end, he became a team manager. One charged out onto the battlefield. One operated the logistics of the business. Dao Zhan had originally thought that they would be the best partners together, but he realized after a while that they were moving farther and farther apart. Business is business. He began pursuing profits, while his partner only knew how to fight on the battlefield, not keeping up with his path. Gradually, Dao Zhan began thinking that if it wasn't for this partner holding him back, where would Excellent Era be at now? As Excellent Era failed to make profits year after year, this thought started to grow firm and take root in Dao Zhan's mind. The best partner that he had once envisioned had become the greatest hindrance to Excellent Era's growth. Finally, he set out to kick Yishu from the team. But when he thought about it now, was that really for the sake of profits? Or was it due to envy? Dao Zhan didn't know. He only remembered that every day, when he thought about how that guy was holding him back, he would often think about how if he were the battle god, if he were one autumn leaf, he would certainly have led Excellent Era to even greater heights. He also longed for glory. After all, he had once been a glory player too. But what was the point of thinking about all of that now? Dao Zhan laughed bitterly and shook his head. Suddenly, the sound of the practice room door creaking could be heard. A person pushed the door open and walked in. Yishu thought it was Su Mucheng. When he turned his head, he saw that it was Chu Fei. Senior, seeing Yishu, Chu Fei was startled. It's been a while. Yishu smiled and gave a greeting. But then he saw Chu Fei wrinkle his eyebrows at the two of them. No smoking is allowed in the practice room. No smoking is allowed in the practice room? The two stared blankly. Yes, those were club rules, but at this moment, who cared if you followed the rules or not? One person was the boss of the club. The other was the team's former captain. They slowly put down the cigarettes in their mouth. Afterwards, they saw as Chu Fei walked to his seat and sat down. He opened the computer and then started practicing. Practice. Yishu looked at the clock in the practice room. It was 9 a.m. Yes, this was when Team Excellent Era would start practicing in the morning. Usually, the morning was targeted tech practice through a customized practice routine. In the afternoon, they would start practicing Glory for real. Chu Fei was currently doing this morning routine, despite not knowing if Team Excellent Era even existed anymore. Yishu was stunned for a long time. Finally, he let out a smile. He got up and left the practice room. As for Dao Zhan, he just watched as Chu Fei practiced with single-hearted devotion for a long time. Not long after leaving the practice room, Yishu saw someone flash by him like a ghost. That ghost suddenly stepped back 3 times and rewinded back to that corner. He turned his head and looked carefully at Yishu. Old Yi, you're back? That person suddenly asked. I'm just passing by, Yishu chuckled. What are you doing? All club operations have stopped. I've got to go too. Sigh, it's a pity for that new plan I just had. This person sighed. Club operations had stopped. All employees would be dismissed. They would clearly be facing unemployment soon, but this guy was more worried that his new plan wouldn't be able to implement it. Alright then, why not go to my place to continue doing research, Rongfei, Yishu said. Your place? Yeah, Team Happy, Yishu said. Oh, research what? A lot of things like the Myriad Manifestations umbrella. Have you heard of it? Yishu said. The Myriad Manifestations umbrella. This person's eyes instantly lit up. Immediately afterwards, he asked, so when do I start? Chapter 1065. Never come back again. For his job, Guan Rongfei was just an ordinary member of Excellent Era's R&D team. However, if you were considering his importance, he was the true core member of the research and development team. He was passionate about researching all sorts of silver weapons, and this passion didn't lose to the passion that all pro player had for victory. Hearing the words, Myriad Manifestations umbrella, Guan Rongfei immediately became impatient to leave, making Yishu uncertain if he should laugh or cry as he said, wait a moment. As he said this, he saw Su Muqing coming out of her room, carrying a large suitcase. The reason they came back this time was mostly because she had to pack up. Rongfei is coming with us, too, Yi Shu told her. Really? Su Muqing gazed at Guan Rongfei cheerfully. You're in luck then, there's a lot of stuff for you to do there. Can we go now? If any Excellent Era members saw Guan Rongfei's impatience, they would probably be absolutely heartbroken. He had worked at Excellent Era for so long already, but he didn't seem to have any feelings for it at all. This had coincided with Excellent Era's members disbanding, but considering this guy's response, even when Excellent Era was all well, he would have probably been immediately lured away with a, "Hey, we're researching the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, you coming?" It had been rather early on when Lord Grimm's Myriad Manifestations umbrella had been reported back to the club by the guild department. Excellent Era's R&D department had also done some research, and that was when Guan Rongfei was first introduced to this prodigious creation. However, since this weapon was only useful for unspecialized, it didn't have much value to Excellent Era, so they didn't look into it too deeply. This wouldn't stop Guan Rongfei looking into it in his spare time to try and figure out how this thing was created. You're just leaving like that? Is there nothing you want to take with you? Yi Shu looked at Guan Rongfei, a little lost for words. Oh yeah, Guan Rongfei smacked his own forehead and then ran off. Yet it wasn't long before he was back, his hands empty and apparently having not packed anything, but his expression was relieved as he said, "It's all good now." What did you pack? Su Muqing asked. The research and data I've done on the Myriad Manifestations umbrella. I almost forgot it. Guan Rongfei took out an external hard drive from his pocket, waving it in front of the two for a bit before putting it back into his pocket. He looked at the two with eagerness, his face clearly asking, "Why aren't we leaving yet?" "Let's go," Yi Shu decided and took Su Muqing's luggage for her. The three left together, but bumped into Dao Zan, who was just leaving the training room, on their way out. Seeing Guan Rongfei with the two, Dao Zan seemed to understand and didn't say anything, just nodding in greetings. It was Guan Rongfei, who didn't even glance at the boss that had given him his paycheck all these years, already leaving. "So about Dancing Rain. Why don't you name a price?" Yi Shu said to Dao Zan. Dao Zan was puzzled for a moment before remembering the promise he had made when he had first gone to Happy to find Yi Shu. At the time, he had thought Yi Shu would ask for one autumn leaf, but never expected that it would be Dancing Rain instead. "How about 450,000? Dao Zan suggested. Yi Shu and Su Muqing exchanged a glance. This price obviously wasn't Dancing Rain's true value. As the number one launcher character, Dancing Rain was extremely valuable. Even 10 million wouldn't be unexpected. 450,000. If any passerby heard this, they'd probably think they were hallucinating, but Yi Shu and Su Muqing knew where this price came from. 450,000 was the price Dao Zan had originally bought out this character for in Excellent Era's name. During the very beginnings of the alliance, the characters were all brought into the club by the players. These were all characters that the pro players had slowly built up themselves. Back then, the club management had already realized that strong characters would be an important asset of the club, so they arranged for the ownership of these characters to be removed from the players and given to the club early on. That's how the system today was created. The ownership of characters all belonged to the club, and there were rarely any characters that belonged to the individual. Then, after that short period of time in the beginning, these resources were able to be utilized. If any new players joined, the club would provide characters directly. These characters would usually be far stronger than the characters that the players originally used in the game. Su Muqing joined the alliance in Season 4. By then, it was rare for powerful characters to be brought into the club by the player. However, there would be special circumstances where players would continue using their online characters. Because the characters that the players had brought with them wouldn't be that strong, the clubs wouldn't buy them for an exceptionally high price. They treated it as giving the player a small money bonus for signing the contract. Dancing Rain was bought by Excellent Era under these circumstances. 450,000 wasn't a price that any random character in the online game had. It was because Yi Shu had already put some effort into strengthening this character that it was worth more. But for a completely unknown character, that was the most it could be sold for. The Dancing Rain back then couldn't be compared to the Dancing Rain today. Apart from powerful equipment, the current Dancing Rain also had the accumulation of all the effort put into her all these years as well as the halo of the title of #1 launcher. This sort of character wouldn't just increase the strength of a team, but also how influential they were. Situations like during the summer, when Team Samsara had bought the tiny herb grappler Flying Drops and dismantled him into equipment, were extremely rare. In the end, it was because Flying Drops' influence wasn't enough. He wasn't like 100 Dazzling Blossoms who could send his player into the All-Stars purely through the nostalgia fans held of him. Flying Drops wasn't so grand, so what if he was dismantled? If it was a god-level account, never mind the fans objecting, even Samsara themselves would never bear the thought of dismantling it. Dancing Rain had only been bought for 450,000. After so many years, even if Dancing Rain's strength hadn't been raised at all, just through sheer renown, the character's price would definitely be higher. The 450,000 Dao Zhan had given today was undoubtedly a friend's rate. Okay, that's settled then. Yi Shu nodded and didn't say much more. He could tell that everything ended here. This 450,000 RMB transaction would probably be the last interaction they had that bore any sort of emotional investment. After that, they would go their separate ways. They wouldn't know if they would ever interact again, but the past would never repeat itself again. Good luck, Dao Zhan offered his right hand to Yi Shu. Yi Shu glanced at it before finally stretching out his hand to shake. I never need luck. After that, he turned and left. Guan Rongfei didn't let up with the impatient looks at all as they left, forcing Yi Shu and Su Mucheng to hurry. Getting to the ground floor, the entrance of the training center, they saw two people walking in from the front door. Ms. Su Mucheng. Yi Chu. God Yi Shu, the person on the left slowed down upon seeing the three and greeted them. Then he looked at Guan Rongfei and, not recognizing him, didn't greet him. Yi Shu looked at Su Mucheng, feeling a little lost. Though he was a god as well, he was so discreet all these years that he wasn't at all used to this sort of celebrity situation where others recognized him and he didn't recognize them. It was Su Mucheng who smiled at the newcomer and greeted him with a hello. The person didn't introduce himself, just starting a conversation with Su Mucheng. I hear you're joining Team Happy? Yes. What a shame. I really hoped that we would get a chance to cooperate, the other replied. Su Mucheng simply smiled. Then, I wish you three a good day. Excuse me, the person didn't have the intentions to chat for too long and left with that. That person from Tiny Herb is probably here to negotiate some sort of transaction. Su Mucheng didn't wait for Yi Shu to ask before explaining. Since Yi Shu was so low-key in the past, he mostly only knew pro players in their circle. Apart from that, he would keep his interactions with other members as low as possible. This was one person he had never seen before. Oh, hearing Su Mucheng's explanation, Yi Shu nodded. It's probably about Chu Fei's transfer, Su Mucheng guessed. Team Tiny Herb had never hid their interest in Chu Fei. They had expressed interest during the Challenger League. It was evident that it didn't matter if Excellent Era was eliminated or not, Chu Fei was someone they would be interested in transferring over regardless. However, Tiny Herb probably felt that they had more of a chance with Excellent Era's current situation. Thinking of that figure still in the training room, Yi Shu realized that Chu Fei did have that sort of "I won't give up even if the world is ending" demeanor to him. Tiny Herb. Would he join them? As they were thinking of this, the door was opened once more and someone else entered. This person wasn't just someone Yi Shu and Su Mucheng recognized, even Guan Rongfei recognized him. In the past year, this was the person who took the position of Excellent Era's vice-captain. With his eyes set on the future, he was like coal in the harsh winter for Excellent Era. Yet the coal hadn't even flickered to life yet before they had all frozen to death together. Xiao Shikin's figure seemed to hold that sort of desolation. It hadn't even been a month since the end of the Challenger League finals and this guy seemed to have already gotten thinner. The two sides met at the door and spent a long time in silence, enough so that Guan Rongfei began to look impatient again. You haven't left yet? Yi Shu asked. Yeah, Xiao Shikin nodded. What are your plans? Yi Shu asked. I don't know, Xiao Shikin shook his head. He had sacrificed a year and made a resolute decision. However, he had completely failed. The defeat at the Challenger League wasn't a small blow for Xiao Shikin. How about you come to Happy? Yi Shu suggested. Xiao Shikin's contract was only a year long. That meant, he was the same as Su Mucheng. His contract ended at the end of June and he could transfer for free. Happy was willing to try and get a player that didn't require a transfer fee. Happy? Xiao Shikan thought for a moment before smiling bitterly and shaking his head. What can I do in Happy? Happy doesn't need me. Yi Shu didn't know how to react to that. Xiao Shikan's talent was tactics, but Happy had Yi Shu. The loss in the Challenger League, in reality, was also Xiao Shikan's loss to Yi Shu in tactics. This loss had killed his confidence in Yi Shu's presence. It was clear that he didn't think he would be of any value in Happy. I still have something to do. Excuse me. Xiao Shikan didn't seem to want to speak with Yi Shu further and quickly excused himself and left. What a shame. Yi Shu gazed at Xiao Shikan's retreating figure with disappointment. Are we leaving or not? Guan Rongfei wouldn't hold in his impatience any longer. Alright, let's go. Yi Shu didn't know if he should laugh or cry, leaving excellent era with this guy. After walking out of the doors, he couldn't help but glance back. This place. He'd probably never come back again.